I was 29 when I left Chicago, the city that raised me, that taught me how to survive, how to hide emotions behind polite smiles and short answers. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I married a man who said he could give me the kind of life I thought I deserved. His name was Daniel. Back then, his voice had this quiet confidence, the kind that made you believe him even when you knew better. We moved to Brighton, England, a small coastal city that looked like a postcard. Colourful houses, sea air, people walking their dogs along the pier. Everyone seemed so happy, so free. And I remember thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe this is where I'll finally feel like I belong. The first few months were fine. Daniel's job as a sales executive kept him busy, but he still found time for me. We'd go out for drinks, have dinner near the sea, talk about silly things, like what colour to paint the kitchen. It wasn't perfect, but it felt normal, comfortable. And after years of living under my parents' control, I was grateful for that kind of peace. But peace never lasts long, does it? It started small. He'd come home later than usual. Sometimes I'd hear him talking on the phone in the hallway, his tone sharp, impatient. Then came the bottles, the smell of whiskey, lingering on his breath when he kissed me goodnight. I told myself it was just stress, that it would pass. But then the laughter stopped. The dinners stopped. We stopped. He became a stranger I lived with. His presence filled the house, but his attention never reached me. I tried to talk to him, to tell him I missed him, but he'd only shrug or say, "You're overthinking again." Those words broke something in me. Maybe it was my hope. Maybe it was the last bit of self-respect I had. Days blurred together. I'd wake up, make breakfast, watch the same morning shows, scroll through my phone for hours. Brighton was beautiful, but it was a beauty I couldn't touch. I didn't work. I didn't even have anyone to talk to. Daniel was always too tired, too busy, too drunk, so I began to drift. It was a cold Sunday evening when I first downloaded the app, a simple chat platform, anonymous and harmless. Or so I told myself. I remember how fast my heart was beating when I created a fake name. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe attention, maybe validation, maybe just a voice that didn't make me feel invisible. The first message I received was from someone named Miles. He was charming, funny, said he liked my sense of humor, even though I wasn't really trying to be funny. We talked for hours that night, and when I closed my phone, I realized for the first time in months, I was smiling. It became a routine. Every night after Daniel fell asleep, I'd lie in bed with the glow of my phone lighting up the dark. Different names, different voices, but the same rush of feeling seen. I told myself it was harmless, that it wasn't real. But the truth is, it felt more real than anything Daniel and I had left. One night, Miles asked if I wanted to meet. My hands trembled reading that message. I didn't reply for a whole day. The thought terrified me, but the curiosity was stronger. I had convinced myself I just wanted to see what kind of man he was. That it wasn't about cheating, it was about connection. When I finally agreed, I couldn't stop shaking. I wore my favorite coat, sprayed perfume I hadn't used since our honeymoon, and stood in front of the mirror trying to recognize myself. I didn't, but I went anyway. We met in a quiet cafe on the edge of town. He wasn't what I expected, not in a bad way, just different. His smile was kind, but his eyes were intense, the kind that seemed to see right through you. We talked for an hour, maybe two. He asked about my life, my marriage, my dreams. I told him more than I should have. When we said goodbye, he kissed my hand softly and whispered, "You deserve more." That night, I cried in the shower, not because I felt guilty, but because deep down, I believed him. After that day, something in me shifted. The loneliness didn't go away, it just changed shape. I started talking to other people too. Each conversation felt like an escape, like stepping out of a locked room. But the more I escaped, the more trapped I became. Brighton sunsets became my confessions. I'd sit by the window, watching the orange sky melt into the sea, wondering when everything started to go wrong. Was it the night Daniel stopped looking at me the way he used to? Or the moment I decided to look elsewhere for what I'd lost? I didn't know it then, but that first message from Miles was the beginning of everything that would follow. The lies, the fear, the guilt, and the night that would change my life forever. After meeting Miles, something inside me cracked open, and there was no way to close it again. I told myself it was just one time, one meeting, one harmless secret. But secrets grow. They stretch and twist until they take up all the space you have left. Daniel didn't notice anything at first, or maybe he just didn't care. He'd come home drunk more often, sometimes collapsing on the couch with the TV still on. Half-finished bottles on the table. I would stand there, watching him, wondering when exactly I had stopped loving him, or if I ever truly did. At night, when the house was silent and Daniel was lost in sleep, I'd grab my phone. I wasn't just talking to Miles anymore. There were others, men with different stories, different faces. Some were kind, some were cruel, but all of them made me feel alive. Every message, every call, was a small rebellion against the loneliness that had consumed me. It's strange how quickly you can become someone you don't recognize. I wasn't that woman from Chicago anymore. The one who played it safe, who followed rules, who thought happiness was something handed to you when you did everything right. I had stepped into a world where nothing was right, but everything felt intoxicating. One of them, a man named Ethan, lived not too far from Brighton. He worked in IT, divorced, said he understood loneliness better than anyone. He was funny, attentive, and he never made me feel judged. For weeks we talked every night. He sent songs, poems, photos of the sea. He said he wanted to see me in person, to know if I was real, and I said yes. I met him in a park near the city center. The air smelled like rain, and I almost turned back twice. When I saw him waiting by the fountain, I felt my stomach twist. He looked ordinary, just a man in his 30s. Holding a coffee and smiling nervously. We talked, walked, and when he touched my hand, I didn't pull away. That night, I came home to Daniel sitting at the table, half drunk, eyes red. He didn't say anything at first, just stared. Then softly he asked, "Where were you?" I froze. My throat went dry. "Out," I said. I needed air. He nodded, took another sip, and said, "Sure." The silence after that was worse than any argument. A week later, things escalated. Daniel's drinking turned darker. He'd get angry over small things. The dishes, the noise from outside, my tone. Once, he threw a glass across the kitchen, and it shattered near my feet. "You don't even look at me anymore," he said. "You're not the woman I married." I didn't respond. Because he was right. One night, after he passed out on the couch, I sat on the balcony with my phone. The cold air bit at my skin, but I didn't care. I was messaging 3 people at once: Miles, Ethan, and someone new. I told myself I was in control, but deep down, I knew I wasn't. I was addicted to the feeling, to the attention, to being wanted. Then, it happened. Daniel found the messages. It was a Tuesday morning. I had just stepped out of the shower when I heard him yell my name. His voice was shaking, full of rage and disbelief. I walked into the bedroom and saw him standing there, holding my phone. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. My stomach dropped. My mind went blank. I couldn't speak. He threw the phone across the room. "How many?" he asked. "How many of them, huh?" I said nothing. He stepped closer, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Pain, betrayal, love, all tangled together. Then he hit me. It wasn't hard, not like in movies, but it was enough. Enough to break the illusion that this was still a marriage. Enough to wake the neighbors. Enough to bring the police. The officers came, asked questions, took statements. They said Daniel would have to leave for the night. As they escorted him out, he looked at me and said, You ruined everything. Maybe he was right again. After that night, I barely slept. The house felt haunted, filled with echoes of arguments and apologies that never mattered. Daniel came back a few days later, calm, almost fragile. He said he was sorry, that he didn't mean it, that he just lost control. I nodded, pretending to believe him. I didn't tell him the truth, that there wasn't just one man. There were many, because if I did, I was sure he'd destroy me. For a while, I stayed quiet. No messages, no meetings, no flirting. I told myself it was over. But the silence was suffocating. I tried to rebuild something with Daniel, but he was already somewhere else. Mentally, emotionally. The gap between us wasn't just distance anymore. It was a canyon. And then, one night the past came knocking. It started with small things. A text from an unknown number. Then another. I miss you. Why are you ignoring me? You think you can just disappear. I blocked the numbers, but more kept coming. Then, one evening, while Daniel and I were watching TV, something hit the window. A small, sharp sound, like a pebble. Daniel jumped up, pulled the curtain back. But there was no one there. I laughed nervously, said it was probably kids. But deep down I knew it was someone from before. Someone who didn't want to be forgotten. The next night, it happened again. A louder noise this time. Daniel went outside, shouting into the dark, but no one answered. The night after that, another. I barely slept, my mind racing with possibilities. Faces from my phone screen blurred together in my head, and I couldn't tell which one had followed me into real life. I thought I could manage it. I thought I could hide it again. But I was wrong. That stone was just the beginning. I remember the first night the sound came. It was soft, almost uncertain, like a pebble gently tapping against the window. For a second, I thought it was just the wind or maybe one of the kids from the neighborhood fooling around. But then it happened again. Louder, sharper. The kind of sound that makes your heart drop before your mind even understands why. Tom was sitting on the couch, half asleep, a bottle of whiskey balanced between his knees. The noise startled him awake. What the hell was that? He muttered, stumbling to the window. He looked outside, but there was nothing. Just the streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement, and the shadows of trees swaying with the wind. We both stood there for a while, staring into the darkness. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Something inside me knew it wasn't just a random prank. Somehow I felt watched. The next night it happened again. And again the one after that. Always around the same hour. The same sound. A small rock hitting the glass. I started to dread sunset. Every little sound made me jump. Even when I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things. I couldn't ignore the chill that ran down my spine every time that tapping began. Tom grew restless. He didn't believe me at first. Maybe it's your imagination, he'd say, until one night he saw it too. That same sharp sound, that same shadow slipping behind the hedges. That was when everything began to fall apart. Tom stopped drinking for a few days. He became obsessed instead, checking the windows, installing cheap security cameras, leaving the porch light on all night. I thought maybe it would stop, but whoever it was, he didn't care. He wanted to be seen. A week later, Tom finally caught a glimpse of him. A tall man in a black hoodie, standing at the edge of our garden, motionless, just watching. My heart nearly stopped when I saw him on the security footage. I knew that face, even if it was partly hidden. It was him, one of the men I had spoken to online. His name was Daniel, or at least, that's what he had told me. We had met once, months ago, just once. And when I tried to end things, he didn't take it well. He'd kept messaging me from different accounts. I had blocked him over and over, but he always found a way back. And now, he had found me here. Tom wanted to go to the police. I begged him not to. I couldn't let him know the truth. He thought it was some random stalker, not a ghost from my own mistakes. We'll handle this ourselves, he said, jaw clenched. No one scares my wife in her own home. That night, Tom stayed awake. He waited by the window, his old baseball bat leaning against the wall. I couldn't sleep. Every breath felt heavy, like guilt pressing against my chest. Around midnight, it happened again. The sound of gravel hitting glass. Tom jumped up, yanked the door open, and ran outside before I could stop him. "Tom, don't!" I screamed, but he was already gone. I followed him to the front yard, barefoot, the cold biting into my skin. I could see the shadow of two figures near the fence. One of them was Tom, yelling, swinging the bat. The other was Daniel, his voice trembling. I just wanted to talk, but Tom didn't care. The bat came down again and again. I could hear the sickening thud, the kind that doesn't belong in real life, but in nightmares. I wanted to run, to stop him, but my legs wouldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, watching as Daniel collapsed to the ground. When I finally reached them, it was too late. Daniel wasn't moving. Tom was breathing hard, his face pale, his hands shaking. "He attacked me," he said, over and over, like he was trying to convince himself more than me. The sirens came minutes later. Our neighbors had called the police after hearing the screams. I still remember the flashing blue lights reflecting off the window. The same window that Daniel Stone had struck so many times. They took Tom away that night. His hands were still trembling when he looked at me for the last time. "This is your fault," he whispered. "You brought him here." He was right. I did. The next few days were a blur. Statements, questions, court dates. I told them what I could, what I had to. But deep down, I knew there was no truth I could say that would make any of it better. Tom was charged with manslaughter. They said it was self-defense, but there were too many wounds, too much rage. When the trial ended, he was sentenced to prison. I sat there, numb, listening to the judge's voice fade into the background. I didn't cry. I couldn't. It was like something inside me had shut down completely. Afterward, I walked home alone. The house felt like a stranger's place. Cold, quiet, haunted by echoes of everything that had gone wrong. The glass in the window had been replaced, but sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear it. That small, familiar sound. A single stone tapping against the glass. And every time I do, I wonder if I'm being punished for what I did, or for what I let happen. When the judge's gavel struck that final time, something inside me shattered quietly. The sound echoed through the courtroom, final and heavy, like a door being locked from the outside. Tom didn't look at me as they led him away. I don't blame him. I wouldn't have looked at me either. After that day, I stopped counting time. Morning bled into night, and weeks passed like smoke through my fingers. The house was silent, too silent. The kind of silence that hums, that feels alive, that reminds you of everything that used to fill it. His laugh, his anger, his footsteps pacing the hallway. Gone. The first night alone, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a memory crawling back. I kept thinking about Daniel, about Tom, about every message I had sent that started this avalanche. I kept asking myself if I could have stopped any of it. But the truth is, I didn't want to face that answer. The neighbors stopped talking to me after a while. I think they were afraid of me, or maybe they just didn't know what to say. Brighton felt smaller every day, like the walls of the town were closing in. I avoided the market, avoided the park, avoided every place where people's eyes lingered too long. I told my parents I was fine. They didn't believe me, but they didn't insist either. We'd always been experts at pretending. Money became a problem. With Tom gone, everything fell on me. The rent, the bills, the groceries. I hadn't worked since we got married, but that luxury was gone. I found a job at a small bakery down by the pier. It wasn't glamorous, but the smell of fresh bread and coffee was the first comforting thing I'd felt in months. The owner, Mrs. Palmer, was kind in a way that didn't ask for explanations. She never brought up my past. She didn't need to. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with quiet pity. but she'd always smile and ask if I wanted tea. In that tiny bakery, surrounded by strangers, I started to feel almost human again. But nights were different. Nights were still mine to battle. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing that faint tapping sound in my head. It had become part of me, a reminder, a punishment. Sometimes I even imagined Daniel's face outside the window, pale and still, watching me. I knew it wasn't real, but guilt doesn't care about reality. It has its own way of haunting you. Tom wrote from prison once, just once. The letter came folded neatly, his handwriting careful but distant. He said he didn't hate me anymore. He said he understood now that anger had ruined both of us. But the last line stayed burned into my mind. Some nights, I still hear the glass break. I didn't write back. I couldn't. I didn't know what to say. That wouldn't sound like an apology too late to matter. Seasons changed. The sea turned grey and rough. Tourists disappeared from the pier. I kept working, kept breathing, kept pretending that I was moving on. But every now and then, when the world was too quiet, I'd think about what my life used to be, about the girl from Chicago who just wanted to be loved, about the woman who mistook attention for affection, about the wife who watched everything she built crumble because she couldn't face her loneliness. One evening, as I was closing the bakery, I saw something through the window. A young couple walking hand in hand under the streetlights. They were laughing, pushing each other playfully, sharing a world that still believed in beginnings. I smiled, but it hurt, because once that had been us. Once that had been me. That night, when I got home, I opened all the windows. The air was cold, but I needed it. I needed to feel something real. I stood by the same glass Daniel used to haunt, looking out into the empty street. No shadows, no stones, just silence. For the first time, it didn't scare me. I whispered into the night, "I forgive you." I wasn't sure if I meant Daniel, or Tom, or myself. Maybe all of us. And in that moment, I realized forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't fix the cracks or bring back what was lost. But it lets you breathe again. It lets you stop listening for the sound of stones that will never come. It's been a year since then. I still work at the bakery. I still live in the same house. The window's been replaced twice. Once after a storm, once after a careless accident. But every time I look through it now, I don't see ghosts. I just see the world moving forward. Sometimes, on quiet mornings, I sit by that window with my tea and watch people walk by. Strangers with their own stories, their own mistakes, and I wonder how many of them carry their own broken glass inside, like I do. Because the truth is, we all do. We all have something fragile that once shattered and left us trying to piece it back together. The difference is, some of us finally learned to stop bleeding from the edges, and for the first time in a long, long time, I think I might be one of them.